girls, even as local campaigners refuse to give up. Now, it's been 90 days and counting, and the girls are still yet to be found. The Voice of America spoke with U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, on how far America has gone in redeeming its pledges.
As you know, after the nearly 300 girls were kidnapped out of Chibok village, this act galvanized the world and galvanized the international community to support Nigeria in addressing this issue. We have been working with the Nigerian government on addressing this issue for quite some time. But since the kidnapping of the girls, we have sent a multi-agency team to Nigeria to work with both the security sector but also civilians, because we see this as being multifaceted, multidimensional approach. It is not just a security approach. It's an approach that requires the government to look at the needs of the communities in the north, to address those needs. It's an approach that requires us addressing the needs of these girls and others who've been kidnapped by Boko Haram. When they get reintegrated into their communities, they're going to need a lot of support. So we're working across the board with the Nigerian government, but we're also working with governments in the region, Nigeria's 4 neighbors, who have also suffered the impact of Boko Haram, particularly Cameroon, where we've had a number of kidnappings of individuals from the international community. Currently, there are 10 Chinese business people, civilians, who are being held by Boko Haram. There were missionaries in Cameroon who were held by Boko Haram and who've since been released. So we need to work in a regional way to address the issues. The French government has been involved. As you know, French President Hollande hosted heads of state from the 5 countries a few months ago. A few weeks ago, the British government hosted the ministers so that we can further look at how we can work together to address the threat of Boko Haram. We have put sanctions on Boko Haram, determined that it is a terrorist group, and we are working with the UN and other agencies to move forward on that designation.
Coming up on Network Africa, ECOWAS 45th Annual General Meeting has ended. Find out what resolutions were reached.
22 airports around the country, an industry that generates billions of naira, connecting millions for business and leisure, will put you through the paces and give you an insider's view on the aviation industry. Watch Aviation This Week only on Channels Television. Aviation This Week, keeping an eye on the aviation industry.
Welcome back. You're watching Network Africa on Channels Television. I am Adeshewa Josh. Before we move on to talks on the just concluded ECOWAS Summit, here are some other stories we are tracking.
At least 14 Tunisian soldiers have been killed in a multi-attack near the Algerian border, with at least 20 others wounded. They say gunmen armed with rocket-propelled grenades and rifles raided 2 checkpoints near Mount Champ. It is reportedly the heaviest death toll registered by army since independence in 1956. The Tunisian army has been waging a crackdown on militants operating in the mountainous region over the past year. Street children in Uganda face constant abuse from police and other government officials, the human rights group says. Human Rights Watch said police beat children with whips and wires, throw them into jail, and extort bribe from them. French President François Hollande have begun a 3-day visit to West Africa. Likely talks on security threats in the region and fostering economic ties are expected to be top on his agenda. François Hollande is being accompanied by 50 French business leaders. His first stop was in Ivory Coast. France still has huge economic interest in Africa and many French businesses operate in Ivory Coast. A court in Egypt has sentenced 7 men to life imprisonment and 2 others to 20 years for sexually abusing women last month. The women were attacked in Cairo during celebrations following the election of President al-Sisi.
Leaders from the 15-member Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, met in Ghana on Thursday, July the 10th, to discuss worsening insecurity in northern Nigeria, and in Mali, where Tuareg separatists routed government troops last week, as well as the increasing cases of Ebola in the region.
Président de la République du Ghana.
The disease continues to spread in Sierra Leone, Liberia, and to a lesser extent in Guinea, with a combined 44 new cases and 21 deaths between July the 6th and 8th. ECOWAS agreed to set up an Ebola Solidarity Fund at the 2-day summit in a bid to back a regional approach to the epidemic.
I wish to call for the contribution of urgently needed resources to speed up the containment effort. We must scale up our efforts and power to defeat this deadly disease. We must exercise vigilance and caution and avoid any panic or misinformation. I also wish to challenge the national and regional medical research institutions to intensify efforts aimed at finding a cure or vaccines for diseases such as Ebola.
Continued attacks by suspected members of Boko Haram Islamist group, which kidnapped 276 schoolgirls last month in Nigeria, was also discussed. Since April 14th, when the girls were taken, at least 500 civilians have been killed by the militants, according to a Reuters account.
The United Nations is deeply concerned about the persisting insecurity in northeastern Nigeria as a result of Boko Haram terrorist activities and the violence against innocent civilian population, with the attendant violation of human rights and dire humanitarian consequences. I wish to reiterate our solidarity with the people and government of Nigeria. We welcome the support of ECOWAS to the counter-terrorism efforts of the government of Nigeria, reflecting the solidarity of the countries of the region and their legitimate concern about the spread of violent extremism.
Nigeria's President Goodluck Jonathan said he had ordered a full-scale operation against Boko Haram and sought to reassure parents of the 219 schoolgirls still being held by the group that their children will be freed. Despite a year-long military offensive against it, Boko Haram, which is fighting to reinstate an ancient Islamic caliphate in northern Nigeria, has been able to run riot in the northeast and bomb cities across the country.
Finally on the program, Libya's government is considering calling for international forces to help re-establish security after deadly clashes closed Tripoli airport, hindering air links with the outside world. The country's airport closed due to the fighting between liberal and Islamist militias when they came under a renewed attack late on Monday. Dozens of rockets were fired, killing a security guard and injuring 6 others.
A militia shelled Tripoli airport, destroying 90% of planes parked there, as heavy fighting between armed groups prompted the United Nations to pull its staff out of the North African country. 2 soldiers were killed and a number of planes were damaged when a militia shelled Tripoli airport on Monday. 3 years after the fall of Muammar Gaddafi, Libya has slipped deeper into chaos with its weak government and new army unable to control brigades of former rebel fighters and militias who often battle for political and economic power. 7 people were killed in Tripoli on Sunday in the worst fighting for 6 months in the capital, where rival militias have been fighting for control of the airport. Security and medical sources say at least 6 people had been killed and 25 wounded in Benghazi in heavy fighting between security forces as well as rival militias since last Sunday. The UN mission in Libya said the closure of Tripoli airport and the deteriorating security situation made it impossible for it to operate. In Benghazi, irregular forces loyal to renegade former General Khalifa Haftar bombarded Islamist militia bases as part of his campaign to oust militants. Special forces clashed with militia fighters in the city. Most of the dead and wounded were civilians, and according to medical sources at Benghazi Hospital, at least 10 houses were hit with missiles, and government offices and banks were also forced to close. Western powers fear chaos in Libya will allow arms and militants to flow across its borders. The south of the vast desert country has become a haven for Islamist militants kicked out of Mali by French forces earlier this year.
That will be all on Network Africa this week. Let us know what you think through the email address and phone number on your screen. If you missed any part of the program, please visit youtube.com/channelsweb. Till I see you again, imagine your world better than it is. I am Adeshewa Josh.
A time comes in the life of every race when people are driven by echoes of the past to chart a course for an exalted future. Africa is a blessed threshold, as major actors in the Africa arena plot a renaissance towards common destiny. Let's pedal across the streams of yesterday, through the backstreets of Africa, to the defining roles of policymakers, the political realities of the African nation, balance of power, and the strive to sustain national interest and identity. Join us on Network Africa on Channels Television. Network Africa, the rallying point for the emergence of a new Africa.